Okay, so continuing our CD work today. We're close to starting some implementation, let's say. So we are working on the architecture. So I did some preparations in the architecture realm, so we can discuss those. Let's start in this new area. So Damian, this is what I think Damian was specifically talking about last time in some part about various kinds of event sources. So can it be project pipeline or like Git repo or multiple of those? And I mean, I remembered that CD events project. And in CD events project, they are, unfortunately, that project doesn't have a lot of attention or a lot of traction, but they did quite a lot of groundwork, which is very useful. So as you can see here, they have this, source control events, they continuous integration events, deployment, and so on. So, I mean, none of the source control vendors adopted any of this, unfortunately. But as you can see, they have a bunch of events that would be very useful. Okay, maybe not repository create, modify, deleted, but in other realms, it's very useful. So, and they also treat continuous integration separate from continuous delivery, which was also something that was it was tricky for us to figure out how to convert it, and they're treating those differently. So build queued, started, and so on and so on. So all of these, I think, could be quite useful. But going back here, so having those CD events there, let's see, sorry, source code management control events, got me thinking that at the entrance level, in terms of starting events, we could have multiple repos. So let's say repo A and repo B and C and so on, and then potentially that some are being pushed to a Docker registry and so on, and potentially also a CI system X. And these, if they are implemented by polling, as we talked in some iterations, or we instantiate a hook for each, not a hook, but an endpoint for each of these, and we are listening for those being hit by a GitHub or like any other provider. And what we could be doing after this layer is converting them to those two events on our side. So we would have a separation there, an abstraction layer that could potentially free us. So I'm just going to say here events or messages that we will be connecting to the rest of the system. So essentially there is a layer in between which is doing that mapping and conversion. And this is that mapping layer. Okay, and then from that point on, as I continued drawing this down, so what it seems that we need to have kind of a unified queue of things that are happening. And this is that queue. Let's say that the very at the bottom is the oldest event, and the top is the newest event. So they're being, pushed in. And these events are just landing in here. So if I would say here, hit A, and then maybe type of the event is a tag or something like that. So this is this beginning stage. Connections with the external systems, to say.
Okay, and this is in a case where one stage listens to all four of these, or
no. This is some like abstract message bus, to say, of all the events that are flowing into our, let's call it, workspace. And I can also extend it here. So this could be also like a Semaphore pipeline. If someone wants to listen to it, Semaphore, the project, let's say project RS CI pipeline. I know it's a little bit abstract, but give me just a second. And here we have stages. So stage A, stage B, and let's say C. So some of the basic attributes or behaviors of these stages. So stage A is subscribing to events, and stage inputs, and stage B is also emitting events. One of those events could be when it's finished. So if we are like broadening the picture of the events that would be generally useful, somewhat generic event that we could be emitting from the stage A is, we could say, stage A started. So just like that, maybe there is a stage that wants to react to the, at that point once stage A started. Then stage A could finish. So what's happening? And let's say stage A could react on Git A tag. So stage A reacting to something happening in the something and on this message bus, which is of its interest, subscribing to this, fine. Then it's starting, and what it's doing, well, it's also putting things on the same message bus,
Okay.
So stage A being finished.
Yeah, one question for that. Is this like, are all these things like queuing together, or is it just like representation here?
This is just a like somewhat abstract representation.
Okay, so we
like
don't
communication channel between communication.
Okay.
This message bus is a communication between stages and what they are listening to and emitting, and also from the external world, things that are coming are also landing here.
Yeah, but in essence, each it lands in its separate queue. So there's a queue for Git A.
No, I don't know. So this is just, I'm sharing what I have been thinking about. But I would say that this concept of a message bus or event bus is very useful. At least it was very for me for thinking.
It just shouldn't be the same one for everything, because then one issue with
No,
one of these events
they're separate. Each one has a separate queue. This is a message bus. This is not a queue.
Okay.
And so this stage A is emitting, as we spoke last time, like a version. So it can emit that version 1.2 of when, let's say, is deployed to stage A. And the point being, it has to publish it somewhere, and we don't know who wants to listen to it, you know, since all the stage, someone from, you know, some guy from the building across the town might add his stage, and let's say that it's stage B, and that person says, okay, I want to listen to event, to an event which is maybe when of whatever version, exiting stage A, being the output of the stage A. So as this stage is being, you know, instantiated by, you know, some team X, it has to gather those events from somewhere. And then this message bus is the place from those, and it's subscribing to a particular type of the event. And those events are all flowing on that message bus. And this is the queue for this particular stage. And based on that, you know, that, let's call it subscription, it's going to be filled up with those events. Let me see. One other thing that comes out of this is that if we would have this centralized message bus where all the messages are flowing, the versioning system that we spoke about last time, maybe I can just, you know, copy it from here. I think that the versioning system could be implemented by having somewhat like separate component that would be essentially just listening to this message bus and grabbing all the messages of interest to it. So last time we spoke about a certain, I don't know if it's a separate type of event and a message, but a version. So if we have a type of event of a message which is version, and let's say that I add a couple of more data points into this message. If there is a version type of message and entity app, whatever, I'm going to say app is when, and version is 1.2, and maybe a data point is, I don't know. We talked about, you know, other things that could be included here.
Okay, but and what emits that? And
well, any stage, for instance. So let's say stage A.
But stage A also emits stage A finished, and then what are you reacting
on? Depending what do you want to react on. You know, it can emit multiple messages, and don't take this as like, you know, set in stone. This is just things that, you know, it came to my mind that every stage could be emitting also these very generic, you know, outputs that might be useful for, I don't know, notifications, God knows what. But this particular thing is probably more in that category of like output, you know, that you want specifically defined to emit out. And if there is this message bus and all the version messages, either events that are either coming into a particular stage or going out, are also appearing here, and it's just, you know, flow. And if I'm building this, you know, versioning system, I could subscribe to this message bus and I say I'm listening to all the version, you know, events. And as I'm getting those events, I'm taking out, you know, okay, what is the app? What is the version? What is the stage? Is it red, green, or what it is? And I'm pretty much building my own set of like my own representation of what's happening in the system here. In terms of some abstract implementation thingies that I was thinking about, so if stage C says I want on a particular Git repo, I want to listen to those tags, plus I want to listen to versions coming out of stage A or whatever. I could, and if this is like that message bus, which is, you know, continuous flow and has its kind of like ever incrementing IDs of new things coming in, and all of these things are spinning concurrently, I could maybe say, okay, I was sleeping for a while, and then I'm waking up, and I know that I'm subscribed and I'm interested in two types of messages. Let's say version of van and git A. I come to this message bus and I say, okay, give me everything that has happened under certain conditions after this pointer, and I'm pointing wherever was the last thing that, you know, went through me. And I'm selecting, okay, these are all the new things that are of interest to me, and I put in my individual queue the things that are of interest to me, what I'm subscribed to. And let's say if the if one of the attributes of this message bus that it's immutable and append only, so it's kind of like as in the database that, you know, log that you have where you just append. Yeah, I'm getting into maybe not very suitable level of like technical details here, but just sharing my thinking. I could have list of IDs here in my queue, which are pointing back to this, you know, message bus, let's say, because this is like immutable log of everything that has ever happened, which is being stored in a timeline. And then, yeah, I think I already said, but one of the things that we could be, you know, adding here are also all the events that exist, that don't exist, but, you know, are the C events that we have in the Semaphore CI today, as they are today. So maybe I can stop here and discuss a bit.
I mean, so like the main benefit of this, like I think like this is just like maybe a bit of a different way to throw down a picture down there, and the only thing that we
this one,
yes, essentially, because like these lines that we were like drawing from, like let's say one maybe not this one, but the one below. So these lines between things were not like direct calls, but each of that line was like emitting something, like creating something that is like, or updating a certain record, right? And then the next one reacts on that. So like the difference between that top and this thing below is that like now we have like this one place where everything gets recorded one after another.
Yeah, there is no difference. It's the same system. I was just thinking, you know, how to map things out.
Yeah, sure. So to think so, like this idea, like the main benefit here is that one where that we have like a ever increasing ID that you can react later. Like if you wake up after some issue, you can start from where you stopped. That's a nice thing. The downside is potentially that we are creating a bit of like a single point of failure for everything. So it would have to be like implemented correctly.
Again,
So if something breaks here, it doesn't stop everything.
yeah, and I think that this can be implemented in 1,000 different ways. You know, this component here, and that ideas is maybe not even like a good idea. You know, it just helped me to think about this stream of things that is happening. And this can be implemented through just a table in Postgres. It can be RabbitMQ. It can be Kafka. It can be all kinds of crazy things that exist out there. And I don't have like any opinion, and I couldn't. I really don't know what could be good for this. I would say that the thing that I'm most happy about that I managed to connect in this one box, that these events that are being shuffled from one stage to another, and these events that are coming from the outside world, to put them in the same kind of bucket, and this versioning also, where there is a single, it can be just a query interface, this piece, wherever, however it's stored, wherever it's stored. But I have a query interface as this, versioning app. I can subscribe to this, and I can, in loose coupling, build the whole functionality by just, following some queue of a particular type of the message. So that's one component, and the other component that I like is that again, the outside world should be mapped
to one type
to messages.
Yeah. I had a similar plan for that. Also, like we would have to. This allows us to easily add another type on the outside, and then just like, or someone else can add whatever listener for whatever service they are using, as long as it is like mapped out to this seed event. So that's definitely something.
Yeah,
we would need.
A problem with CD events is that they are meant for interoperability. And it's very useful, like reading through those pages, because they have really put the time into mapping those source control, events and CI events, and then CD events. And they also have some operation events, incident and a ticket, and they're. But the set of data points that those CD events messages are carrying is very, very high level and limited.
Yeah.
So we cannot use it.
Yeah.
We can learn from it and help us think about things, and give us some some wind in the back in some areas, but it's not usable for us. It's built on top of cloud events, but the cloud events are just specifying the type of the message, and which 4 fields do you have. You have ID of the message, you have type of the message, you have payload, which seed events might be useful.
Yeah, we could like you could like always take like, let's say, CD event and then add a field that's called like something key value, right? And then like you fill it with whatever you want on the source side, and on the like stage side, like you are checking for specific things. And let's say if there is like, if you want stage to work on something, then like it has to be present in source. If it isn't, it won't work.
Exactly.
But yeah, so we do need like some level of like that generalization in between, and then like we can add specific stuff, but only if like both source and the end know how to handle that additional details.
And what's the example of something that they're missing in their specs?
I mean, they usually have like literally up to 4 or 5 fields. So it's made to be as minimal as possible, so it can be applied to all CI/CD systems.
Okay. Yeah.
There is nothing specific to any provider.
Okay.
And so this was kind of one batch of things that I did, and then after I took a break. While battling with this, I was, jumping a lot between that. Okay, how much do we want to generalize, and to be open to, other systems, other execution, environments and so on, versus very Semaphore specific. Especially when I was just thinking about those technical details and reading about CD events and cloud events and what could we potentially use. And when I kind of did a reset of my brain and went back, it seemed to me at that point in time that the big next thing for us, probably in talking about this, is how we can make our current Semaphore CI compatible with this. And the main source of compatibility here would be that our existing system starts emitting events that we could be adding to this message bus, regardless if this message bus exists in such a way, or point is that stage A can say, I am subscribing to a project A when a CI pipeline is finished. One cheating shortcut that we could do is that we don't potentially need to create a new integration point with external Gits with some, some drawbacks on the side, of course, is that we could say you have this new blank workspace, fine. You will be adding your stages there. And what do? You say, okay, from my existing Semaphore CI universe, I want to work with these 4 projects. So none will want to work with S2 platform, with WAN repository, ALS repository, take 2 or 3 other ones. And then you kind of drag them as just, icons into this workspace. It's mainly for the maybe, permissions kind of scoping. And then in this workspace, those projects are already connected to Git and listening to all the events. And then let's say if I have a blank slate, I'm starting to create my CD delivery pipeline. I added my first stage, and I'm going to be mapping, let's say, platform work. Then from sub drop down, somehow I click on the plus, and I say to this workspace, I'm attaching I forgot how Downloader is calling those, but there is one called Schlag, I think. Okay, and if I attach that project to this workspace, then from that point on, when I'm defining what are the triggers for this particular stage, my first one, I could say, okay, so it's, I think this is very extra, schlag.git.tags. So it is in the realm of like reusing the connection that you already have to GitHub and that projects are reacting to. And I want to react to this particular type of a message. Or the example that I think Damian was talking about. I have some other, let's call deployment pipeline, where I want to react to when dot pipeline passed. And maybe I don't know if you have to do this or not. Do you have to connect this CD workspace with that particular project? But let's say these two, I'm connected to these 2 projects. I mean, point being, to make it simple, these 2 projects, then that's one of the reasons why I wanted to maybe add them particularly to this workspace, because then those projects, there is some, checkbox being, clicked on those 2 projects, and those 2 projects start emitting events that we use internally. and then those events are funneled to this CD workspace. And pretty much, if you add these two projects in, and if you imagine having a drop down here, it gets filled up with all kinds of events that our current CI is emitting, and you can subscribe to those if you want.
And also Git Hub events, because you're now listening to the webhooks from those projects, right?
Yeah, I was like as a parasite, I'm attaching myself to those. It has drawbacks. It's mixing the systems together.
It has a lot of like. I like this one with pipeline, but this one with Git is a bit troublesome.
Yeah, the only question is, are we using the existing webhook or creating another webhook?
Yes, and it's making things user friendly.
It's not only it's not only that, like okay, now what happens when a new tag arrives? Does pipeline get triggered on CI part?
No. The CI part is not. It's kind of you are attaching yourselves to as a parasite, and you are just listening to all the messages coming from Git. It's just that you didn't have to establish a new Git connection, but you are listening to everything.
Yeah, but like from the user
project
perspective,
settings are not influencing this.
Yeah, the project itself and the CI is completely decoupled. It's not impacted in any way by this.
Yeah, it's possibly good and possibly bad, because it's good for, let's say, if you're existing Semaphore user, right? Or like if you already have
it's very bad if you're not.
established.
It's very, very bad. Yeah.
Then like you create it, and then like you start getting pipelines there happening, and like, okay, how do I need to stop a pipeline here, but like I have to get tags here.
That's why it should be considered.
And then the other major downside here is if we ever gonna support Git outside of Semaphore projects, and I think we would need to at some point, right? Yes. Then it ends up like being issue, like whatever we add in that Git integration, we would need to add in Semaphore webhooks integration. Let's say in Git we add, okay, we are now reacting when issue is opened.
Mm-hmm.
And then like we would either like have like, okay, through Git directly you can get issues, but through schlag.git you cannot get the issues, or we would have to like change on the Semaphore side, let's say like, okay, now we are having, now we listen for issues on CI side, so we can pass that information to CD.
Oh, okay. But
I'm
just using issues, but yeah.
This only looks. It is very attractive to existing users, because for big customers that have hundreds of projects, they don't have to, when they are creating this CD workspace, they don't have to establish a new connections for each of the projects. They can be reusing that. Independent of the CI and CI projects, there would have to be like a GitHub integration, Git integration here, because people who are just not using Semaphore CI today but want to use the CD tool, we don't want to force them to go and create dozens of projects, if they want to listen to those dozens. So it would need to exist both ways, but let's not get stuck on this, Git thing. It's like, it's an idea.
I just have one question about that, but I won't take long. When we say create a Git Hub, specifically integration, what does that mean? It still goes through our GitHub app, or is it some other way?
That's
it's the same.
Good question.
You are just subscribing to you're adding a webhook to a repo. That's it.
Okay.
So you have a repo X. It could be one click operation. If you want to get to that, it's a one-click operation. You have a list, and you say here, I want to start listening to my.
No, that's clear. My point is that in that case, it's going through the same
Well,
integration anyways. So
it
that
might
is
No.
it wouldn't go through same. It would probably go through a separate like Semaphore
different
GitHub
app.
app. Yeah, different tab. So
Because
we can
Alex need
decouple
to
them.
do this mapping. We need to do this translation. So hook is coming in, big JSON payload, fine.
Yeah.
But then we want to transfer to this, and we want to store it as in a different place. So it will be like a new thing. But it's not the main point. The main point here is that we would probably, I don't know. I left this thinking that okay, so one of the our next big things that we have to figure out how on the technology side how we can pass the events from our existing system. Let's say this one in particular, we don't have to go anywhere else.
That one is simple. Like we right now have webhooks on Semaphore that are emitted whenever pipeline is finished, and that are filled with a bunch of data. We can always like extend it if we need something else, and it would be just like emit that webhook on some endpoint. We can like create various kinds of integration, one-click integrations that would allow you to like, okay, I'm now listening for webhooks from this project and this pipeline and so on, and then essentially just create that listener for a webhook. So it's that part is not problematic for these like pipeline events. For these Git events, that would be a bit a different story.
Okay, we can use that manifest for Git events. So even when you're like connecting, you can select what you want to subscribe to, and then that will generate you the app that you need to install with those permissions. So it's not like a fixed thing. You can.
Yes. So like I was more thinking in an area where like we want to have those things separated, because on like CD side we might want to react on more things than we are currently do on CI, and then like just not to affect everyone in CI with like if those things are coupled, then it's much harder to like introduce any changes separately.
Absolutely.
All clear now. And the fact that we now have that user generated app that you can have allows us to granularly adjust permissions within the UI. You know, you select what you want to subscribe to when you're creating that integration, and that's it. Okay, cool.
I mean, CD events, they have also event for, they have a testing events. So you can literally, not useful for the CD part, but just to mention. So when the test passes, test fails, you know, like all those kinds of things.
We don't. I don't see like we have flaky webhooks for flaky tests, right? Like, but we don't have like test reports. But then again,
not very useful.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can always create like a pipeline that runs only one test, and then like if react on that pipeline, like it's a bit clunky, but I think the Darko, the main like issue or point like here with this like, are we how much are we tackling the existing Semaphore CI and its users, is like, are we starting with this one pipeline CI best thing, or are we starting with Git? That would be, I think, like the main decision point here. Like we want to have both of these. We want to have like as nice as possible integration with Semaphore CI. In the end, definitely, right? It's just like, are we focusing on that first, or are we focusing on like generic stuff first, and then like adding this later?
So maybe one question.
I don't feel like a big.
It's all clear that Git integration thing needs to be a separate eventually. But what Darko mentioned at the start, why wouldn't we for MVP also subscribe to existing Git webhook payloads for the project? So in that case, you kind of have both. We're starting with Semaphore project, sure. But you can also model the CD flows.
We don't like.
I mean, we could somewhere very early, Damian,
Yeah.
in the very, very early stage, just copy that message to one additional queue or one additional table. We don't have to decide that now. It's the implementation thing, you know. Implementation things should be considered also.
Yeah, but like,
What's-
okay, let's say like this. Like we have like, maybe not currently, but it's a part. So we have like a hooks receiver service and hooks processor service currently for CI, let's say, for GitHub. And then like essentially like adding Git integration would be like basically inheriting those and changing stuff a bit, and then like extending that.
No, I more
that
meant
area.
like literally webhook is arriving, you know, and it's entering like a web request processor for a particular project, and then we are adding it to let's say one other database table on one other RabbitMQ. So we're very, very early, you know.
I understand
doing
that
copy.
part, but like webhook arrives as a huge JSON. Then you have to process it and to like sort it into some internal structure or something that we understand. And then like if we are creating that part that is like getting that webhook and transferring it into this event that we are later working on with, that's essentially majority
You're
of
saving very little.
It's majority of the work for creating Git source is that part, not like this part that is listening for webhooks. That's like simple endpoint. It's
clear.
So
yeah,
it wouldn't save us.
We are not
a lot.
reusing a lot.
Yeah.
That's good.
I mean, having it for Semaphore projects has its own value on its own by itself, because then you can have CD workflows that are based on multiple different projects and have a unified view there.
And when you select a particular project and you want to use it, we can create a new webhook for that project. You don't even have to know, kind of a thing. You know, so the user experience could be still amazing on the same level if we are reusing the existing ones, or if we are just going to add one new one and listen and funnel the messages somewhere else. So the UX could be exactly the same.
But the question is, in that POC version or MVP or whatever, are we having this Git events or Semaphore events? And I would say Semaphore is easy win.
I don't know. We will have to decide. The main, just to mention something, the time that we have, one of the questions that I end up running into is what's the technology behind to support this kind of behavior. So this can be, let's say, just a logical representation of the system and how it works, how it's implemented down below. There are many different ways to do it. However, sooner or later you do end up with the question if just for instance this versioning gap or any stage you would want to subscribe. Any stage would be essentially subscribing to this flow of messages and just saying, okay, I want these particular types for me. I'm interested in listening to those. What is the technology behind that can support this? You have CD events. CD events are relying on cloud events, and cloud events are kind of, to some extent, technology agnostic. So they are defining the format of the message, and then they are serializing that message into various formats. You can have Kafka behind, you can have RabbitMQ behind, you can have all kinds of like proprietary cloud things behind. And the overall format of the message, I share this, has this annotation. Okay, so it's then it has build, and then it has started, and so on. So based on this routing, you can subscribe. You can, if you want to subscribe to all the builds, you just put this. You can say this. So all, if you want only the started ones, you put this. Started, and then you have that chaining and filtering. So I think that my hunch is that the first starting point should be the hardest, and how to define this, syntax for subscribing to events. Because if I subscribe to 4 different events and I add certain conditions, such as I want to react to the when version is green from stage A plus 6 hours later, I want to start executing something. Maybe defining the format for the messages that are coming from Semaphore could be one area.
It could be like I want to react when version is green on stage A and 6 hours passed, and
It's not
corresponding commit has changed somewhere, and I don't know, it was manually promoted by someone else, and like you can go to like a lot of details.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot of freedom here, unfortunately. So you can also say that this stage A can react to potentially anything coming from a repo, from this repository. The question is what we expose. You can react to the tag, but it's not forbidden to react also to branch being created or to new push being made. And then it's like a super detailed thing, but at some point becomes a very, very important. So if it's I don't know if this prefix is even useful, but git, and then you say I don't like this syntax, but I don't know how to, let's represent it like this: git, and then you say my repo A, and then do you narrow it down by saying tags. So this one is somewhat in the obvious realm.
What was the issue with having all of them and being able to react to whatever?
It's an implementation thing.
It's an implementation thing. I mean, I would just leave it here. So at least in my head, there are like somewhat of like 2 paths. One is using like SQL database as Postgres that we are using, and then building the queries and polling and whatever mechanisms that this stage is executing on some huge table or whatever. Or there is the other approach of like using some kind of like message queue, where this particular stage is then relying on the routing that exists in the technology. There are probably many, but I just don't know. But
yeah.
I think that's one of the big technical decisions that we would have to make. We cannot make it just like this. I feel that's maybe the biggest technical decision to make.
If it's possible, like it would be great if we could like keep like the approach that we're using mostly here. So like we have both push and pull mechanisms, where like pull one is working mostly as a backup essentially if you miss something on events.
That's the question on those guarantees. Like, is the missing possible? What missing means, and all of that. When you're doing the AI conversations, they are arguing a lot against polling as a super resource intensive, and you have many stages. The amount of polling on the database that you would have to do is like huge.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why like you're using it only as a backup reduces that a lot, because like you could say like once every minute I check if there are events that I missed or something like that. But
yeah. I don't know how much times do you guys have in your calendar, but I don't. I mean, is it obvious to you what are maybe some of the decisions that we are missing? So, what's the next step? What you could?
I think we would need to draw like at least I'm planning to like draw out a bit of like architecture for this, like at least like main components, and like maybe like one or like 2 or 3 different approaches, and then we can like discuss the pros and cons for each one. Like if we are going that like implementation route as soon as possible. The other thing would be probably like we would need to like, I'm still not sure we nailed down like the let's say milestones and like what are we focusing on for MVP and what are we going to do going forward. That's a set of decisions also that needs to be made. And yeah, I think from like functionality we are mostly there, right?
On the high level, I would say yes.
Yeah, so like there is like maybe some like maybe one of the things that we could do here also is like zooming in on that syntax for defining when the stage gets triggered, like what are all the possibilities that we want to do here, and like because that might like impact
a lot of things.
Yeah, how we are implementing various stuff on the other side.
I mean, one suggestion just on the top of my head is even if it's not the syntax, then kind of in human language first, and then syntax maybe next. In what all the ways you can subscribe to various apps and versions and events and so on, and scenarios that we can heard about that we have in our company or with other customers. I mean, for some of the main messages that we're interested in. So it seems that it's either this message about something being done in the CI and something being produced like a version, or the or the Git tag, how those messages look.
Yeah, it's also like interesting maybe to still like if just finish quickly, if like there are things that might be connected, right, between like various sources. What I'm thinking about is like this, okay, CI event finished pipeline passed for this, and there was a change to in the commit for which pipeline passed, there was a change to version file. Let's say the version file was bumped, right? I'm not completely sure how that we would like, yeah, if we would have to like clone the repo there and then like check if that thing changed for the commit that's connected to this pipeline. Like,
I would completely ignore that in the first pass. I don't know how much it will hurt us later if we now completely ignore that.
Yeah, sure. I was more thinking like
It's quite hard.
Not implementing it at all, but like maybe just thinking like if there are like cases like that where you need to like create like trace reflect, yeah, there is a second step after. Like you have a pipeline event, and then connected to it is something that you want to examine also before executing stage. That is one thing, and the other thing that we are like in like this representation is hard to see is that there are cases where like stage B would need to take the latest version of something when it executes, but it is like not triggering it. I'm not sure if I'm clear. So let's say stage B is packaging I don't know, your application, right? And whenever there is a new version of the code, it should like produce a new package, but at that point it should also take the latest version of docs and package it alongside. So like the output is like one binary that contains both source code and docs. And then like let's say docs changes are not triggering, like producing a new version. But whenever source code is changed, we should take the latest version of the docs that is available and package it into new thing and then ship it.
And you need to produce the message in the end. So that's also the area. I mean, when this is instructing a project to run some pipeline, and to that pipeline you can pass some parameters, but how do you get the data back? So something was produced there, in that pipeline, which is maybe a deployment pipeline or whatever. And then you want to produce this message which is going back, and you need artifact URL.
Yeah,
there needs to be a mechanism
to read the data from the thing that is being finished.
Yes. CD events have something which is very seems very advanced, but I thought at the beginning, okay, this is very hard to attain for us. They have literally like artifact created, artifact deleted, artifact downloaded kind of events, which seems like very cool and powerful. Not sure how hard would that be to create for us. I did not mention, just want to do that briefly. So there is CD events as one project. I would definitely suggest that you both of you just take a look what's there. The other is Argo Events. So Argo Events, it's like kind of a little bit misleading in the name. Why it's called Argo Events? Because it's part of the Argo generally ecosystem, which is part of a broader Kubernetes ecosystem. But it is also somewhat agnostic to Argo and not really connected to Argo. And they are using that, of course, Kubernetes syntax, and then they instantiate these things as literally like a small ingress, where you say that /git_webhook, that's a listener, and then they tie it to some other resource by some name or label, and that other resource is maybe in some way doing this transformation actually into event, but they are living in their own parallel universe to see the events. But from what I have been able to find, they are the only kind of people that systematically worked on these event, translating CI, CD events into something that can be connected to other processes, like in practice. Let me just briefly share that. I mean, so it's, you see, Git, and then translated S3 events. They also emitting events, so they have like event S3 file created, event that you can subscribe to, schedule streams, kind of anything. and they have do all of these as triggers that can go in. So Damian, one that you have mentioned is HTTP request for our, let's say, pipeline finished coming in, but they listen to a bunch of other ones.
Did we start reviewing this in the context of artifact events, or are we still in that?
Are events?
Artifact
I'm
events.
just no. I'm more mentioning this as what exists in the world, which is similar to what we are working on right now, are Argo events and those CD events. Because here they it's not a sensor, maybe it's a trigger. I cannot find now but the YAML examples are interesting. You know, it's kind of easy to understand from what they are doing. But in terms of how much ground they have covered in terms of this implementation and what are all the things that they are supporting, this is probably the Argo events has the richest collection of these things that they can react to and map. And what they build is exactly this component that we also have to build. So this translation of like things happening wherever, you want to put them somewhere and then continue working with them. Okay, Damian, I think that you are driving from this point on.
Okay.
You will have most time to focus on this, and yeah.
Okay. Just to circle back to that point of like reading information from stage execution, I think in the end we will have to like we will end up with something like, okay, we are going to read some format of a file from some location, and you can say you can
Probably.
give us the location and yeah, maybe some types of like authentication for that, right? So like from like self artifacts we can probably like manage, but let's say if that's some S3 or if it's like
yeah,
circle artifacts or
exactly.
whatever,
There
right?
will have to
Like,
be some proxy.
yeah.
We'll not definitely not passing, you know, anything but strings. I will have to invent some
format, and then like
mechanism.
And then it will be like a file would be just essentially key value. So like you can back up with whatever data you need into that, and then we will make it available later.
Yeah.
That's one way. The other way would be like for you to ping us from inside the job. Like let's say you're sending HTTP requests somewhere with like data that you want to add to.
I think that has a pros and cons, but that could be like a very flexible way. So cloud events, CD events by default have a Go SDK, and you take that SDK, and then you run that SDK wherever you want. You can run it inside of your pipeline. You can bundle it into your CD tool, but someone has to emit events, and someone has to read events, and so on. So there is a potential of us having like an SDK, and you take that SDK and you say that upload this file for this stage. And then we upload it to our artifacts and pass some metadata, and then becomes one of the outputs or artifacts coming out of that stage. It's a very powerful way. People have to do more than maybe just put some files somewhere. But then there is So if you are living inside of Semaphore ecosystems totally, it's different than if someone is executing a stage within a Jenkins job. If it's that, then there's another question.
Yeah, it's probably
but generally
like
having a
it's probably easier than like creating like reading from somewhere and then needing to like set up authentication and everything. Like you would need to set up something that we can read from, and if it's like in closed network or it's
since we were checking for inspiration of what's on the market, the Argo CD and CD events have that public thing, but for handling integrations. I think it's also good to check Datadog. They have a bunch of integrations, and although you cannot see how they handle them in the background and how they exactly subscribe to those, you can see how they are connecting various different tools to some central system. Even we don't know what's in that central system, but from the UI you can see it. I mean I can just quickly share. They have hundreds of these. So if you go with
these between SaaS connections, between SaaS apps connections, almost always rely on webhooks, because webhook is essentially like a message passing mechanism where you don't have the queue in the middle because you don't have like a shared technology stack. So let's say between Semaphore CI and this CD part, we could establish like a Rabbit as a backend or something like that. But with the external things you cannot connect, then you rely either you are hitting someone with a webhook or someone is hitting you with a webhook. And Damian, with that message busting, I mean, if we would just, for instance, write the abstract interface, like get me next message or push something there, or pop something from that queue or whatever. What do I want to say there? Yeah, we could establish that interface, and the implementation below is potentially something that we don't need. It can be interchangeable, theoretically. I don't know how CD events establish that. Yeah, my point was that potentially that message bus, whenever something enters the message bus, you can subscribe to a webhook, and it hits you with a webhook with whatever enters it. It could be useful for other people. Whenever, like in your CD system, there is a new message going in there, someone can subscribe to it, through an external service. Would be a very nice integration point. Or potentially someone could, with the API, if they are, following the structure, could push a message there. And message, it could have a public interface. And someone wants to build a better version tracking system, they subscribe there and they listen to new version, happening, whatever. And that's the integration point. It's kind of the central integration points. And if you expose that, then you don't have to do, okay, when this stage I want a webhook to hit me, we'll do it, please subscribe to a message bus, wait for that message there. It will be one of the messages. And it will hit you, and then you do whatever you want to do.
But it's not a lot of different of like we will have a generic webhook source, right? And then like you create a generic webhook source, and once it hits, like it creates a message inside. So like there is essentially no difference, right, between those two. And like if you want to like emit event from like once something enters the message bus, then you want to ping something else, then essentially what you do is create a stage that listens to that, and then inside the stage you hit whatever you want. just so we are not like creating various other like various other
Yes, but
points of execution. All right.
But it's, yeah, I think it's a nicer integration if like a JSON message hits me. If something, I'm building something external, I'm building a new versioning representation. I don't like how Semaphore is presenting versions and all of that. I want to track that myself. I would find it nicer if like, there is some JSON messages hitting me and I can, just program there. Or I need to create a stage which is going to run the CD pipeline, and I need to have a job which is then going to,
But
it's
either
just
way,
it's a different level.
Either way, like you would have to specify somewhere what we are hitting, how we are hitting it, credentials, in which format you are sending stuff, and so on. So like it's essentially like all the things that you would need to specify for stage, we just like differently formatted, essentially, and then it completes live.
I'm more thinking like creating a webhook. So as the webhook is getting defined on GitHub, for instance. So you go to a project, and then you say, let's take this one, for instance.
Yeah, you're just saying hit this endpoint when like something happens. Okay.
Yeah, in that category. Oh. Yeah, you go to that workspace wherever you specify where you want something to hit you whenever there is a new event, and you specify secret if you want, and potentially send everything, or you specify which events you want. But let's say send everything.
Yeah. My point being is like we would have to implement this all specifically for that, like webhook sending from the queue, and the other way around is just from like you can do it from a stage, right? And we will also have probably like stages will when stage ends.
You could have stage listening to star.
Yeah, and then like we can also have like I think we will need to have it the same way we have in CI. We will need to have like stage finished and it transmits a webhook somewhere, right?
You mean like a generic event, like generic behavior, or?
Yeah. So like if you want to like do something external, then stage finishes, right? So like again, it's still to be seen, like whether we want to that like happen when stage finishes or something else, or maybe when pipeline inside finishes. Like you will
that's the beauty of
multiple,
I mean, I remember when speaking with that guy that implemented Envoy proxy, he said that one of the main strengths that they had that allowed people to plug in different levels. So they have like middlewares, or you can write like a C++ plugin, or there are multiple integration points. So this like having webhooks that you are just I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to pass all the messages to you, and good luck, implement whatever you want. It's integration with the external world on a different level. So where we are just funneling out some JSONs and people do whatever they want. And yeah, it never crossed my mind this listening to star for a stage that runs whenever anything runs. It's also like an interesting thing.
Yeah, and then like inside it, like you can do whatever you want, like whether you want like to upload data somewhere or like to trigger something manually, or right.
To do like a Slack message or whatever. Okay, then let's maybe wrap it up for today. Okay, thank you guys. See you.
Can we stay for a minute?
Yep.
Just wait.
everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to stop recording and then talk about something else.